Hey everybody, welcome to Hear Us Out. I am Patrick.
And I'm Paul. How's it going?
That guy right there is Paul. We are going to have a bit of fun tonight. We have a bit of fun every time we do one of these. What are we doing, Paul, other than pointing out that people need to chill out and stop being such crazy fanboys?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about which goes books and movies, movies and books, which one's better, kind of thing. It's going to be interesting because it's all about people need to, as Patrick said, people need to chill on the kind of like the book was better kind of monarch, and just we're going to explore that a little bit more.
Yeah, I believe the medical term is relaxing the cax. So
Yes.
if you can chill your butt about why nobody should ever be allowed to make this book or they ruined that by doing that. I have seen some unbelievably aggressive people online go absolutely bananas, go, no, 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 but this isn't comics accurate, or whatever it might be. And that's the other thing. This affects so many different types of media, medium, and properties. So it's not just books. It's not just books that get adapted. It's video games. It's comics. It's graphic novels. It's novels. It's all types of literature. Poems have literally been adapted into movies. I like to put it this way: if you have an idea for a movie, if it's based on something else, it doesn't matter to me. If your movie is good and you have a good reason to make it, that's fine. Now, make a bad one, at least criticize it for being bad. That's my I'm setting my stall out early. But Paul, I think as we go through some of these things, I think we should probably use what was used in the thumbnail to start us off, and that was Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings is a great example of something that people go, it's too hard to adapt to the screen. And then Peter Jackson, I think, proved that wrong. I think he did a good job adapting. Keyword, adapting for the screen.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely agree in the sense that like it's such a fantasy epic. It's an origin fantasy for a lot of other writers and everything like that. Like Peter Jackson had a monumental kind of task ahead of him with it, and he did really well. Like I know there's a lot of differences in the books and stuff like that. You know that makes sense, but like the book or the movies are coherent storylines all the way through. There's the middle one doesn't seem like it's actually like a vehicle to get from one place to the other. It actually feels like it's part of a trilogy, like which is the fall of a lot of trilogies. And the book also had like the book does that as well, kind
Yep.
of thing. So like it's Lord of the Rings is a very good adaptation of the book trilogy. So
Yes. And for those that absolutely love Tolkien's original works, it also brought loads of people to the books. Because lest we forget that Lord of the Rings as a series of novels goes in and out of fashion every 10 years. And if it wasn't for the movies, it may not have come back into fashion for quite a long time. So it increased it. If anything, it acted as a nice big advertisement for the property that you love so much. So Paul, I'm gonna throw us a little bit sideways into the classics. I'm obviously it's how should I put this? When we're talking about doing it well, let's use a really good baseline example. Very famous novel, To Kill a Mockingbird. It's Pulitzer Prize winning. Everybody thinks it's great up to a point. Some people hate it, but most people think it's great. Don't make a movie of that because it's already so good. Well, To Kill a Mockingbird as a movie, fantastic. It's great. Was nominated for half a dozen or more, 8 or 9 Oscars possibly. I think it was one of the first real big multi-nom kind of movies. I find very very few people who are willing to die on the hill of the book was great and the movie was terrible, or even vice versa, if you've experienced both. So I think it's one of those things where people never bring it up, and there aren't fan people that are like, oh, they never should have done it, and that says something to me. I think some of the fan reaction stuff doesn't apply to one-off properties. It doesn't apply to things without followings or fervent nature or something that goes really deep. That's a single story with all of 8 characters realistically in it. I think you don't have people who are going down to the what we'll talk about later on to the level of getting into the universe, like the Marvel universe, perhaps.
yeah.
So I think that's why people don't absolutely lose their mind and throw their biscuits around about this.
Yeah, like I think there's a fair amount of adaptations that don't have essentially the not the stature, but essentially the following, the like fanatic following that would cause a phenomena like
Yeah.
But I also think just an interesting point. I think I don't know about you.
Everybody else can decide in the
It's
comments. Is what Paul says now interesting? Yes or no?
Yeah, is it my other problem? My problem though with this whole kind of thing is that a lot of it is about stature in a fan base.
Oh,
You know, like I feel like a lot of people there's a lot of people who will argue the differences between the movie and the books. I've met a lot of those kind of people, especially with the Lord of the Rings
mm,
kind of thing. Um, but they also will agree that Tolkien's writing is also very kind of can be very dull and slow and stuff like that. So, but there's very few people who are just like downright the books are better. But those people feel like I feel like they're doing it because it's like a stasis within the fan base that they're just like they've decided that they're going to take a hill and a stand and just be like, I will die in this. I'm classical and stuff like that, and I don't
yeah.
want, kind of thing. So I don't know if other people think that, but I do feel that a lot of the people who are saying there are cases that I do slightly agree that the book is better than the movie, but I also from later on I have a epiphany about things now.
This
Um,
one's going to unfold, and I just want to call out in the comments. Somebody, and Irish is already backing you up. This is very interesting, and I agree. I think I want to address the elephant in the room, or the hat that I'm not wearing. Yes, there is a different hair thing going on right now. Let's just say that it's an adaptation from my original hair, and it's what I could get together before going on screen tonight. So thank you for noticing, and thank you for the nice compliment. Actually, also Kitty Cat, that's very very cool. But I did want to roll back to what Irish said about the extended edition is better than the theatrical because the pacing and the story work better, and I'm pretty sure that's in reference to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I would agree with that, and that's why Lord of the Rings is a good example because you said better. Not that the theatrical releases were terrible, but it's something that the theatrical releases worked really well, and then they actually managed to improve by giving a director's extended cut. Yet, there are still some incredible, to your point, Paul, there are some people who incredibly want to define themselves by raging against the fact that Tom Bombadil or something isn't in it. It's like, that's the kind of purist I am. And it's as a way to prove that they've read the books or remember the books better than you do or are a bigger fan. So that can be an angle on it.
Yeah, like it's particularly about like Lord of the Rings with them missing certain things and also changing the timing of the creation or the reforging of the sword of the king is like done in the first book, and they also meet Tom Bombadil. But as a story, like as a visual media story, it doesn't make sense that Tom Bombadil doesn't bring anything to the story really. He gives them arrests. He plays around with the ring. He shows how weird he is, and then continues on. And it's more kind of a fantastical element to the book, but in a film media, it doesn't really make sense.
But that's
And then
it.
the creation,
Sorry.
yeah, and then just the reforging and creation of the reforging of the King's Sword and giving it to Aragorn is an epic moment that kind of they do put at a good location kind of thing for build up and drama and thriller kind of stuff. So
And that's the thing. If you can faithfully adapt, or if you can faithfully retell the story of the source material, it's not a function of you did a good job of retelling it exactly. It's a case of were you able to take that original story in a different medium and tell it in a new medium. And you mentioned that it's the change from paper to film. It's a different experience. You can read a book over months. You cannot watch a film over months. As much as Zack Snyder someday will try and get us to do.
yeah,
I want to call it another classic because my favorite book. You're going to notice a trend with me. My favorite movie, 12 Angry Men. My favorite book, Catch 22. There are a few competitors, obviously, to those things, but when I'm really pressed, if I have to give one, it changes all the time, but they're always up there. Catch 22 is one of those things that I think has been very faithfully adapted. The recent the George Clooney, I forgot his name. George Clooney produced or a sponsored or financed Catch 22 six-part series, I thought did a great job of capturing certain feelings and certain scenes and things even better than the movie had managed. I am not precious about it. If they had decided to set it in a completely different war and change all of the characters' names and do something else and say, "Oh yeah, well, Catch 22," I'd be like, right, have you captured the essence? Was there a reason to call it Catch 22? That's where I would come from on this. Now these guys, it's more of the faithful recreation or faithful representation in a different media. But we're going to see as we look at some other stuff that that's not really the case, and I'm kind of okay with that. Actually, Paul, do you want to hit some comments before I move on?
Well, actually, which Catch 22? What do you think of the movie?
I enjoy it. I genuinely do. And if you push me to say, who do I think of in my head when I read the book? Unfortunately for me, I read the book before I watched the movie, so I think of a guy that hasn't existed. If you know what I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
Do you think of Alan Arkin? Do you think of whomever? I'm like, no, I still have a guy in my head that I had to make up when I was, reading the story for the first time.
Yeah, you make up your own character and yeah.
Yeah.
So
I see Kitty Cat's actually asking, are we including plays in this episode? We're including anything. So anything that you guys want to bring up out there, that's also, you can bring it up by liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting and all that, because we just got to get that out of the way. I just want it said once and it's done. But definitely, we love your interaction on this episode. Anything that we might bring up in a moment, but anything that we don't, shout it out. Give us your takes on it. Absolutely. So if you have a video game that you're like, how did they dare adapt that? I'll probably say, well, did they do a good job or a bad job? Because that's the only reason you should or shouldn't for a video game, let's say. So plays are absolutely included.
Yeah, I do want to point out that I do think personally that plays would be a lot easier to advocate towards the movie screen and stuff like that. But there are choices within a movie from a play that will change a lot of stuff because there's a space there that you get to work with a lot more.
It's true.
And if you don't do that well, because like Death of a Salesman by with Dustin Hoffman in it, it's literally a movie play. That's the only way that I can describe it. It's the play that's a movie because like all the sets are done like it's their play. It's literally a recorded play, but it is a movie. It's kind of like it's not on the same levels as like Hamilton, which is a recorded play. This is a movie that is the play kind of thing, and but I do find plays are a little bit easier to adaptate. It's just whether they use the spacing and the kind of like freedom that they have. I think a lot of plays are also really good because of they're restricted by
their pre-existing structural constraints.
So
I hear you.
That'll be an interesting one.
And I'm actually I'm kicking into the comments a little bit there, Paul, just as well to get a head start. And I can see the Irish, your biggest pet peeve is when a movie's not good and you get told you should have read the book first. You shouldn't have to do homework to watch a movie. I completely agree. And there's two things there. If someone says you should still read the book because it's different, I'm like, that's a good idea. So I can experience a different story or the same story told in a different way. If someone says, oh, well, you can't enjoy the movie because you didn't watch the book, or you can't enjoy the movie because you didn't read the book, I kind of always say, well, then the movie failed as being an adaptation. Otherwise, it should have been a DVD that came with the book to go, here you go, this is a bonus after you've read this. I'm with you. I don't think a movie has ever failed because a book wasn't good. Sometimes, if you wouldn't like the book, you mightn't like the movie, and that's all fine. But the idea of, oh, well, the source material, you have to know it or else the movie can't work, then the movie shouldn't be a movie.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. If you have to read, like, yeah, if I'm worried, this is actually funny because I'm worried about Dune in this sense.
Yeah.
Because because Dune is a very complex kind of story, and the David Lynch one didn't really work out too well.
Not for me, and I haven't read the book. So
I'm interested. I really want this to work, but I will automatically take it as a different. Like, it will be slightly different for me because the Harkonnens already look different to me and but the so yeah, I've already separated them in my mind,
Gotcha.
but I'm interested to see how far they are apart.
Well, just before we move on to some of the kind of the other big adaptation kind of angles and all this, uh, there's a talk here from Irish about why the Lion King live action failed. No new creativity, and I think that's a key point. It's about bringing something new if you're working on something that's really really well known, especially if you're remaking in the same media. If you try and rewrite a book, what's the point if you just use all the same words? You're just copying the book.
It's
It's
yeah,
recovering the book. That's all you're doing. You're putting a new binding on the outside.
it's it's such a weird, yeah, it's a great like it's a great review kind of thing of looking at it going, you have just the only new creativity they brought to the to that, like to the Lion King, is the fact is that it's live action. But it's like in a visual medium, just changing the style is not enough.
No, no.
You know,
It,
like
it's up there with just colorizing a black and white movie and saying we made a new one. It's like, no, you've added some polish on top of an old one. Okay, don't get me wrong. I know there were different voice actors and you can have different abilities to emote and qualities of acting, but that's for another time. There are lots of good comments that we are going to come back to. Nora called out, books can be received subjectively. That's why they're so hard. That's why it's so hard to represent them. That's a really good point. And Paul, you kind of even hinted at it there with how the Harkonnens look. You've based that on a description you read in the book, and how
yeah.
you received it and how you put that all together. Because two people can read the same book and then ask them to describe and draw if they're so talented. Let's say if I draw, it's going to be a stick figure. It'll always look the same. You might get two different. You will get two different views because it's how people
Well,
construct based on the same information.
well, you said, like you originally said with Catch 22, you already had a vision of the main character. So like having someone come in and play the characters, it's kind of interesting.
It is.
I do want to quickly, Irish Bear, the Dune miniseries from BBC is great. Just want to say.
And
See, like,
while we're
6
covering our
hours.
bases, I want to call out the Lord of the Rings animated.
That is,
It's fantastic.
it's so good. I'm
Yeah.
only sad that it ends at like the Helm's Deep part.
I know. But it scared the Jiminy out of me when I was little. 'Cause I watched that when I was probably too young to watch it. But thanks, brother, if you're out there. Also, just before we move away from classics, I want to give a shout out to a friend of ours who is the proprietor of the Drinking Carve, as it's called, his home pop-up bar, which he is taking over social media with. But he is a huge fan of a very famous Irish book by James Joyce called Ulysses. There's a great example of, I don't care if somebody adapts that for movies well or badly. I'd love them to do it well so I could watch it. Because I've tried to read that book like 5 times. I find it impenetrable and not enjoyable. Everybody else says it's a masterpiece. I'm sure it is. But that's a great example of sometimes people go, oh, well, there's another book ruined by a movie. Like, well, have you tried to read the book? Because maybe it wouldn't have been for you all along.
I would say that there is sometimes when a movie allows the source material to be accessible to a larger audience.
Mm.
So the tones and like imagery and lesson that the book might be trying to tell is a lot more accessible, because like sadly we have become a lot more of a visual kind of like audience.
And
So
everybody talks about attention spans shortening. I don't even want to get into that. It's the available time is shortening. And we've talked about the abundance of media to try and consume that you might want to. I can't say that we could have this episode and go a whole lot further without bringing up one Stephen King. Now,
yeah.
both Paul and I talked about what examples we wanted in this, and we both picked a Stephen King one each. I chose The Running Man because there is very little relation between the Arnold Schwarzenegger Running Man movie and the Stephen King story. There are overlapping themes, but that's about it. There's a lot less chainsaws and operatic guys in dune buggies and one-liners in Stephen King's original written version. Doesn't bother me at all. Does not bother me. I'm glad that they both exist, and I'm glad that one idea can spawn two really enjoyable things. And I think that's exactly what we should allow, and nobody should be trying to lord it over anyone else going, oh, you like the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie? Have you ever even read the original material? I'm like, yeah, I have. And it's very different. And that's why this conversation is about the movie. If you want to talk about the book in a minute or the story, then let's talk about the written story. It's one of my massive pet peeves because it's usually just a way for people to try and exclude others.
Yeah, like that's the thing, because it going back to essentially the status thing as well, that some fanboys, it is this kind of exclusivity kind of thing as well, kind of thing where it's just like, oh, you consumed the like movie version, oh well, let me tell you the book is, yeah, kind of thing. And it's just like you are, as I say, it brings it back to the whole status thing within the fan base of kind of like, oh, I've read the, the only way that they can be like people who automatically go the book is better and do not have in any way a conversation with you about the book and the movie in a constructive way that interests both parties. All I can say is you are like fooling no one like about your status kind of thing, and you are denying people like a really good opportunity to have like to hear your opinion out about why it is better and stuff like that, other than just shutting people down.
Yeah, it's a strange one. Now, I personally, I'm not gonna say Running Man's the greatest movie in the history of time, but it's, as far as very Schwarzenegger-y movies of the time, it's perfect. Like Running Man couldn't be more what it is than it is as far as movies go. And then you've got Stephen King doing things like Maximum Overdrive, which we've talked about so many times. So Stephen King has a wide variety of short stories and novels that have been adapted for the screen. Some have gone well, some have gone badly, some have been his fault, some have not. Maximum Overdrive, looking at you. But The Dark Tower is an interesting one because you talked to me about that. I had not read anything. It was not really on my radar. And then the movie series was coming out.
Yes, it is, because it's a, I don't know how many books. I think it's like 7 or 8, off the top of my head. But it's like it's Stephen King's Lord of the Rings. Like he says pretty much in the first prologue of the Gunslinger, where it's just like he's like, everybody's pretty much writing Lord of the Rings. I kind of want to have a go at my own version, but I didn't want to put elves and dwarves in it. So here it goes, kind of thing. And like as the prologue goes along, it's literally just him just going, like, I've gotten, a lot have happened and all this kind of stuff. It's very, the prologue itself is also an interesting story because the books are so spaced out within his career that the prologues also talk about like, different changes and writing styles and stuff. But the Stephen King Dark Tower series is very complex. It's like it's one of the main threads that go throughout is in all his book universe. And the Dark Tower movie is, it tries to I like the movie, but it tries to cram in so much stuff that it does not explain in any sense about anything. And it's just like, you gotta calm down, because like I think they were going to do a movie series, and then I think they went, this is too much, we need to turn it into a TV series because it's the only way that we can actually tell the story correctly. But we've also still hired someone, we've also still got a movie coming, so we'll do the movie.
Awkward.
And it's, yeah, kind of thing. But it is so crammed full of ideas. Like, there's so many things in that book, or in that movie, that, like, what we were talking about before, that you have to read the books to, like, understand the movie. This is actually something that you do, like, it's a good movie for me who have read the series, but for anyone else, I definitely, when they turn around, they go, the Dark Tower movie is terrible, and I go, have you read the books? And they go, no. And it's like, I completely get what you're coming from, because there's so many things in there that don't make sense to anyone who don't, kind of thing.
It's, and it's easily explained even outside of all this. For me, it's my car nerdery. LMan 66 or Ford v Ferrari, whichever jurisdiction you got to see it in. Do you need to be me to enjoy that? No. You don't need to know about Lola cars and where they got, chassis from and what was really behind a lot of it. And I'm not going to point out the inaccuracies, etc., etc. they made a good movie. They made it accessible to as many people as possible. Now, what you just said about the Dark Tower, that's one of those grey areas where if you make a movie well enough that people enjoy it and they're like, nah, but then the people who know the series or know the property go, that was brilliant. I'm kind of on side with that. I'm like, okay, you made this accessible to enough of the masses that people thought that's quite good. But for those that actually love the source material, they're like, that's amazing. If you can balance that just right, it's usually perfection. That's where reading someone saying, if you know the video game or you've heard the song or you've read the book, then it gets better. That's when I'm like, great. I thought that was an okay movie. If I read the book and watch it again, it's going to be even better. That's cool. I might even do that. Now, something you touched on about cramming lots in. Kitty Cat's pulled a few great things here, so I want to call out. Either scriptwriters edit a book down too much or try and fill it out too much. That's exactly what you were saying too. Books are more textually based. Terry Pratchett films rarely work well because of all the puns and wordplay that were largely text based. Now, that's going to come up again in a minute because I'm going to pick one of my other favourite books to become both a miniseries, TV series, and a movie, Hitchhiker's Guide. So we'll talk about that in a second. But Paul, you were the one you wanted to call out?
Oh no, I just going on with the Dark Tower thing. It's just the Dark Tower was not well received by anyone, including the people. With Stephen King, there's two other areas or two other movies that I want to bring up, but we can go to the comments first.
Oh no, well, Irish Bowers called out that, and this is a great one. Thank you very much for sharing this, by the way. Movies are my gateway. I have a learning disability. I wasn't able to read my own until I was 18. Movies allow me to get to experience these great stories. That's one of the other things. The amount of time, effort, and also just being able to. So all sorts of things, everything from accessibility of books to ability to ingest them, be that for any reason, up to and including eyesight. You have to say, movies are great. They're unbelievably accessible. They're unbelievably, they're ubiquitous. You can hear and see a lot of stories very, very quickly and be introduced to a lot of great concepts. And then, like we were talking about, maybe get to go and enjoy the source material they're based on, if that is the case. So thanks for sharing that. Have you read the favorite story about Stephen King? Do you want to take that?
Yeah, I do like that. That is, I've heard that story before, which is great. I've heard there's a couple of other stories. Of those
go for that story for the people that mightn't get to read the comments.
It's my favorite story about Stephen King is a woman slapped him and told him that he should write better stories like Shawshank Redemption, which is a story that he wrote. Yeah. So it is a book that he wrote. So.
Why didn't you write something like Stand By Me? Why does it all have to be scary stuff? Okay, Mr. King. So before we move on from Mr. King, did you have more you wanted to throw in?
Yeah, just with Stephen King, The Shining, which is based on a book that Stephen King wrote, he hates the film because it takes a lot of liberties with the source materials. But that's more interesting kind of thing where the movie is more famous than the source material.
Oh yeah,
kind of thing. And then another one is The Mist, which has a famous retelling ending, which is a lot more grimmer than the original story. The source material ends in a different way, and Stephen King actually prefers the movie ending.
And that's the new movie ending, as in the most recent Thomas Jane movie, as opposed to the 1970 whatever it was. Yeah,
well, it's not. It's not The Fog.
Oh, there was a Mist back then too. Wasn't there? No, because I know there's The Fog, which is John Carpenter, but there was an old Mist, I believe, wasn't there? Somebody do an adaptation. Anyway,
someone Google that. I don't know that. So.
Yeah, but I don't think it was very good or popular. I'm waiting for somebody to shout it out because when you talk about Stephen King having loads of adaptations, and Paul, I told you I had this prepped. I have a button ready that's just the Grisham button, not doing any imagery for John Grisham, because talk about the movie being more famous than the book. He pretty much started at one point. He was writing books while they were being adapted into movies. It's almost a simultaneous process now. So yeah, there's a lot there. Do you need to have read the book? No, because they're practically screen ready stories as they are. So I don't think there's any fandom there that's not going to admit, even the diehards who are like, oh, but the books are so much better. They're kind of going so much better, but we still love watching all the movies because we're just Grisham fans. Not that I'm not, it's just not that I am, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like, yeah. I'm trying to think. Yeah, a lot of his stories are a lot like very much like easily to advertise and stuff like that. So The Fugitive is one of my favorites.
It's a great
like kind of thing. Like so,
I think Runaway Jury is even a good one. Can you take the comment that Irish just made about Doctor Sleep, because I still haven't seen it and I know you have and have thoughts and feelings.
See, that's so. Not to spoil anything if you haven't seen The Shining, other than you should be seeing The Shining. The Shining, or in Simpsons terms, The Shinning.
The Shinning
is essentially a psychic ability, kind of thing that like the reason that Stephen King doesn't like the Shining movie is because it completely, like, breathes over The Shining a lot, like so much so that barely anyone notices really it in us, kind of thing. Doctor Sleep really goes to town on it, but really describes it really well and stuff, and like really makes it a part of the movie rather than like, here's a bunch of exposition about a power that you're going to need to know about.
Scatman Carruthers just, talk nice to a kid for a minute and explain the shining. The shin. He can shin.
Yeah, kind of thing. So like it's a really good way of doing it. It's a very clear way of kind of being able to describe the power and stuff like that, which The Shining never did. So I don't think the Doctor Sleep also got it wasn't. I don't think it was overly well received.
I don't think it was, but I don't know how much of that was content as opposed to timing, if you know what I mean. I don't think it was a marketing success as much as it was I don't think it was critically panned, or even panned by those who went to see it. It's just I don't think it was the success that it could have been in the studio's head, I guess.
Yeah.
Can I?
So yeah, it's a great adaptation of the source material. It's like for Stephen King stuff. So I will say.
Can I just say sorry? It looks like you were right. 2007 Mist movie is the only version. I could have sworn there was like a 2-part miniseries. I'm probably mixing it up with something else way back in the 70s.
Yeah, see, there's the new TV series. I know that one, and that movie.
I'm mixing. My childhood had so many different bad things that I got to see 5 minutes of on TV when I shouldn't have been watching TV. So I could be mixing up with just about anything. Moving on a little bit to the sci-fi. I've brought up the Expanse first because I know this is something that you wanted to talk about, and I want to make sure that it gets time.
Yeah, so the Expanse is really good. I randomly stumbled across the book series, which is by watching by reading Leviathan's Wake, which is the first book. And ever since then, I've been absolutely attuned to the book series. And when I heard that they were doing the Expanse TV show, like the Sci-Fi Channel, which is because I know the Sci-Fi Channel was the original guys for us, and then it moved to Amazon Prime. I think so. So, yeah, like this is probably where the Marvel thing would probably come in. I was really excited because I really enjoyed the books, and I've heard a lot about the TV series and stuff. And when I watched the first season, I was just like, oh man, they do everything. They take the source material and do it really, really well. It's a space opera, which is probably the best way to describe it. But it is like there's a lot of things that they do in the series earlier on, and they mix around characters when they're introduced and stuff like that. They mix around storylines a bit and stuff like that, but not to such a massive degree that it gets like varied to a large degree, kind of thing. So when someone goes, "Oh, I like the book better," it's mostly because something in the series probably missed because it wasn't deemed overly necessary, right. Or it's not coming in at this point in time. It will come down later on, kind of thing. But they got like everything else.
And do you think that sometimes squeezes the fanboys out of the, out into the open a bit more sometimes, where they want to express their rage? That if you if you make something that's a million miles away from the source material, I think sometimes you're safer than if you take something, are relatively faithful to it, then start messing with the order, making it your own a bit. Like I know from The Walking Dead fans on both sides, and I haven't read or watched, so I'm speaking from a place of safety and idiocy or ignorance here, I should say. I know people are like, oh, but they were following it and then they moved away from it and yada yada. And yeah, well, good news there is one thing which you can enjoy, the other is the other. But I think people wouldn't have been as bothered if from day one the TV series had been so far away from the original source material. It's because they were quite close that the divergence caught people and annoyed them, because they're like, oh, they're not doing the thing faithfully that I thought they were doing, and that can kind of bring out a little bit of cognitive dissonance, a bit of ire.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. I was going to bring it up myself.
Oh.
Like, yeah, it's and like it's the other like I guess elephant in the room is the Game of Thrones series, which is that the book series hasn't been finished, so the writers of the TV show went in their own direction, and I do think that it's such a shocking moment. It's such a I know that you can look back on our one of our other videos on our expression of what's wrong with the ending of Game of Thrones, but I think that's the worst case scenario, because I was going to say you can't really judge. I wouldn't concrete my opinion of a TV series based on a book series, which goes until the end of the TV series. So if it was a finished book series and a new TV series based on it was coming out, my opinion on the TV series wouldn't be completed and rounded out until the series ended. I would have opinions about certain things and stuff like that, but it would change variety, simply because I wouldn't be wanted to I wouldn't fall into the trap of, if they've changed around orders of things, that I wouldn't be like, oh, well, they didn't introduce this thing, and then literally the next series or the next season, it's literally just about introducing that thing, and I'm just like, well, it's still shit. It would be brought out kind of thing. But yeah, I do think that it's the hardest thing is the hardest thing isn't being really faithful to a book or to the source material, or using the source material to go your own way. I do think that the hardest and most difficult thing to have people enjoy is going halfway and then making it your own. I think that familiarity really burns into people, that they're
Yeah. Whereas, I actually, you know what, I'll save that for summation, so to speak. I'm gonna leave the thought I was just about to express for the end. I've pulled up Blade Runner and Doug Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide. So Philip K. Dick, another author who has had lots of adaptations. Blade Runner, very impressive. Douglas Adams, less so, but actually has had stuff adapted for TV more than movies. Paul, I'll go first in this because I love Hitchhiker's Guide. I love the books. Read them at the right age. Really enjoyed them. To Kitty Cat's point earlier, the idea that wordplay and just the type of humor that's embedded in the writing, some of it being quite absurdist, I would have thought no one's ever really going to make a movie that'll work. In the end, I thought the movie they made worked. Is it the best movie ever made? Is it the best adaptation of a book ever? No. Did it take anything away from the book? Did it ruin anything about the original source material for me? No. Didn't ruin even the old BBC mini-series with Zaphod with the rubber head. It was... Yeah. Nothing was ruined by it. I have a kind of a three-thing rule in this. It can only ever add. It can never really take away unless you let it. And you have to enjoy something for what it is. If you're not able to enjoy it for what it is, then you're the fanboys that I'm talking about, who want to ruin things for others or want to show their might or pull their status. But if you want to say that something's terrible because it's not something else, I don't think you're judging it for what it is. If you want to say there's a missed opportunity there, if they had brought this in, it would have been even better. That's a discussion. That's great. Yeah. That's what me and you do all the time, especially when we're not on camera. that's the fun of it all, is bringing more and adding more flavor to things by going, did you know this? Or if they brought that in, then they could have done this. Wouldn't that have been great? That's what entertainment's about. That's what storytelling's about. That's what, sparking off human imagination and thought is all about. And that's why I dislike the fanboy movement so much, because I remember around Hitchhiker's Guide, it brought out the worst in some of what I thought were the best people, if you know what I mean. Because in general, Doug Adams fans seem to be a fairly chill bunch, let's face it, with good reason.
Yeah.
Now, Philip K. Dick fans, on the other hand, that runs the gamut from one end of the human spectrum to the other. And some of those people genuinely scare me, I guess is the right way to put it. So I'm glad you're the one that picked Blade Runner.
Yeah, because do androids dream of electric sheep? There's some differences between the book and the movie kind of thing. And I know that Irish Barrow also said which version of Blade Runner. So that's also a goddamn minefield as well. So do androids dream of electric sheep is a lot different. Is considerably different to the movie, but it also shows an example of taking the source material, running with it in kind of your own styles and way, and kind of like making it your own, and then but doing subtle nods back towards the source material in areas and stuff like that. So that's really, like, I really enjoyed it. Like, but yeah, and to Irish Barrow's point, even then to go about and make several different versions of the ending, several different versions, just fuck with people, really.
Just to make clear to everybody that that's the beauty of storytelling. When someone tells you a story, you can then turn to the person beside you, retell that story, or ask them what would they think if you changed this about the story, or what was their favorite part about that story, or take a part of the premise or the entire thing and come up with new conversations and new stories. That's why this is all there. That's why I think you should have 50 million versions of any film if it's adding new and interesting angles. It's not always adding new and interesting angles. Not every director's cut's necessary. But I have no opinion on the Scott works at all, because I'm not getting dragged under that bus right now.
Well, because Philip K. Dick is also his expanse towards all the different sci-fis and stuff like that is also considerable. That eventually something's going to be annotated properly or fully, kind of thing. Because the only other one that I really have to say is which goes Asimov's which goes I, Robot. That book is nothing compared to the Will Smith movie. It is so far different. And when people go, oh yeah, but it's nothing like the book, and I'm just like, yeah, but the book is a bunch of short stories on why the 3 laws of robotics fails. It's literally a study case on why those 3 laws would eventually fail because of logic, and what could happen. Whereas the movie is a coherent story throughout. So based on the 3 laws and what they can, and one aspect of the failure of logic,
isn't that the beauty of thought and humanity, that you can have somebody like Asimov write that and have someone else go, here's how I could tell that as a story. I think it's great when, and back to Running Man, I guess, I think it's great when someone goes, you know what, there's something really cool in there, I'd like to expand on that, but I'd like to go over here with it. Okay, Running Man was a terrible example, in fact. Good example of the principle, maybe bad example of the execution. But if you can take a principle or a premise or something you've heard as part of somebody else's idea, you're not ruining their idea. You're expanding on your own thoughts from it. And I think Bruce says, read Trainspotting, watched the film, saw the play, all were enjoyable. Now, they may have been, I don't know if the book is, if it's faithfully told or not. I think, from what I remember, it's a pretty much a straight adaptation. It tries to be pretty faithful. But there's 3 mediums that Brew got to enjoy the same story or the same general idea. That's someone who didn't take it 3 different directions, as far as I know. But what if the book, the movie, and the play were all completely different? It would be just as valid and just as good. And, Brew could have enjoyed all 3 just as much, knowing that they were inspired by the same thing, but not actually retold as the same thing. And that's why fanboys can just take a hike.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, is kind of, it allows you to it allows you to expand on a world or tell it your way, kind of thing. So like, that's all that movies really are. They're
Yeah.
just adaptations of a director's vision of material, really, kind of thing. And we're just lucky enough that we get to enjoy it together. Whereas books, it's entirely your visualization of it.
Yeah.
Like, it's your aspect of the thing, which makes it very difficult to make a movie. So I do think that people need to kind of cut some slack in the kind of like, you are watching someone's interpretation of source material in their own way, kind of thing. And if you got a chance of doing it, like, like as you said, it's perfectly valuable value and like value add and also conversational to kind of go, oh, I wouldn't have gone this way, I would have gone this way, kind of things. But when you close down the conversation by just going, yeah, the book is better, then yeah, you're kind of just shortening your kind of interactions with interesting people.
Well, speaking of interesting people, you go. I can see you just pointed at one of them.
Yeah, the Irish Bowers whole thing of can movies ruin books? Like, I want to say no, but your points there with Fever Pitch being that it's about baseball, the movie is about baseball, whereas the book is about soccer. Um, I do think. See, that's
But not the first movie, because they did do there's an English version of Fever Pitch that's
yeah,
is about soccer. And again, does the core of the story depend on the actual sport? And it's so lucky. I had this conversation way back when that movie came out. Aren't they lucky that football's played on a pitch and that baseball throws pitches? Because the name managed to keep its relevance. It would have been very, very difficult to adapt that to another thing and have the pun work. So they kind of got lucky in that respect, or at least were clever.
yeah, like yeah, I don't. Yeah, I know that a lot of people. I think that's just try and gather my thoughts with this one. Yeah, I think it's a little bit difficult because like the sentiment and the lesson and the kind of like object of the kind of the story is still there. It's just using a different medium to do it in. So it's just by which I mean sport,
Hmm.
kind of thing. It's just different. Like, would a Field of Dreams be overly different if we decided to use soccer rather than baseball, kind of thing?
It would if it
Like,
was still set in America, because the idea of that being
yeah,
the family sport. But if you were to transpose Field of Dreams to, let's say, England and try and make it about baseball, it wouldn't land at all, because it's not a sport there. It's not a popular sport there anyway. But yeah,
yeah.
I take your point. Now, Percy Jackson, Artemis Fowl movies were nothing like the books and were garbage. Thanks very much and welcome along, Ethan. I hope you bobbed weaved. I know you're boxing. That's a great example of what we called out at the start. You can move away from your source material and you can make something bad just as easy as you can make something good. The fact that you used or moved away from your source material isn't the defining characteristic of why something was good or bad. The quality is never related to the fact that it's an adaptation. The quality is related to what you do. And I think, Paul, we've waited long enough. We've got to hit the big gun here. I showed the MCU first. I better let you say something about the boys, because the MCU is where we're gonna essentially throw the gloves down and just start fist fighting in the ring.
Yeah, just to kind of also put my weight against about Patrick's thing. It is very much about how you or how you tell the story in a movie rather than you're taking on the source material. Like, that should never be the case in point when someone goes, yeah, the reason that movie failed was because they decided to tell the story of Superman. It's just like, no, it's the way that they told the story of Superman. That's where it failed. Like,
Yep.
it's never the fact that they decided to do it. Otherwise, we're never going to have any stories or movies ever
Yeah.
again.
And
You know?
this is why it's a perfect time to go into comics, because one of my pet peeves, as you all know, and one of the people who's in our chat knows, and is a person who repeatedly said this to me for years to wind me up, comic book movies. There's too many of them and they're all useless. Like, it's not a function of the fact that they're anything to do with comics that anything is good or bad. You can't decide based on an arbitrary thing like it came from comics. That's like saying imaginary movies are all terrible. So, well, all movies are essentially imaginary. Where it comes from does not define whether or not it's going to be good or bad. It can never be used as a reliable measure. It can be used as a way to say, in general, I haven't preferred, I don't enjoy costume dramas. For me, it's like, I don't gravitate towards them. But it's not me going, oh, there's too many of them and they're all crap. Because that would mean I've watched an awful lot of them. And I haven't. And Downton Abbey, to be fair, I don't know how, but it got under my skin while I was sitting there watching it. I enjoyed that little movie. It had charm. It wasn't great, don't get me wrong, but it had charm. That's an aside. But my point still stands. Mostly when people say all of X, there's too many of them or they're all crap, you kind of go, how many have you watched? And people go, they're not my thing. Like, haha. I think that precedes your point. If it's not for you, and many things are not for me, music being a great example, if I don't get something, I don't go, that sounds like noise. Well, that's not for me. That's not my music right there. Somebody on the right of me will go, yep, sounds like noise to me too. And I'll be like, yeah, well, then it's not for both of us. Because the person next to them will be like, I love this tune, I think it's great. And it's the same for any entertainment medium.
Yeah, I also think that like people who also say that comic book movies are not for them, um, also don't realize the amount of comic book movies that are out there that they probably do enjoy. There's a lot of that because like I do enjoy because they're just like yeah, but I don't like comic book movies, but I really enjoy this. And you're just like, that is a comic book. You do know that, right? Like it's based on a graphic novel. They're just like, but it doesn't have superheroes in it. It's like not all graphic novels have superheroes in them. Like that's not the point of them, you know.
Well, I don't like romance movies. Bet you love The Princess Bride, though. It's like, yeah, there's always going to be enough exceptions to prove your own rule as well to kind of go. It's all about feeling, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with saying it. There's nothing wrong with feeling it. There's no wrong decisions when it comes to all that. It's more being aware of yourself. And for me, I have to be aware of some of the stuff that I don't watch because I know it's my own kind of personal prejudice. I'm like, it's not really my thing. And then I have to force myself to watch the really good ones that people tell me so that I don't miss out. And Downton Abbey, it broke through, man. It broke right through.
Yeah,
to my heart.
It broke right through that I ended up watching the entire series.
Well, actually, yeah, it worked on you too.
So
the boys, the boys.
Yeah, the boys is an interesting one because I am a massive fan of the graphic novel series, like the series there. It is a fantastic. It's a nice. I am deeply into comic books, superheroes all day long kind of crap, but having like the boys and Invincible, like which are like flips of that coin kind of thing, which is like what happens if they were real and not in an ideal like idealistic worlds kind of thing. It's kind of like yeah, this is probably what human superheroes would actually be like and stuff. But with the boys, I really enjoyed the fact that there's things in the comic book that they would not have ever in any way gotten away with. There's no way that they would have been able to make the comic book. And this is where I'm coming from in the sense of there is graphic things in the comic books that would never have made it to air.
And it's not because... I'm assuming you're glad that they didn't try because it would have taken it away from the wider audience that could have then seen it.
The two reasons that I'm glad about it is one a lot of it is to essentially get across the fact that like you or superheroes in this world that are real are just terrible people, which you can tell in different ways. There's a different vehicle to allow you to be able to just portray that on screen by showing us the arrogance of them and showing them they're non-caring about a lot of things that they do and stuff. Like the collateral damage thing alone tells you a lot about how those people are, kind of thing. The second one is a lot of it is also meaningless. Like it is just shock factor within the comic book. It kind of like you turn the page and you're just like, ugh, okay, kind of stuff. So like I'm glad that they decided to cut certain things out and stuff. Otherwise the TV series would never have been made. The other thing that I really like about the boys is that they did go in their own direction completely, and it's essentially a bunch of characters that I really enjoy in a world that I really enjoy, but a difference of the story. You know, I know that they're going to hit milestones that I know about, but I'm interested in how they get to those milestones in their way, you know, kind of thing.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
So
And I think this is where you're going to open up now. You talked about your journey briefly earlier that you're going to have to open up on, and that's why I'm going to go first and then let you. MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and its relation to Marvel Comics and other Marvel properties. Very, very simply put, I don't care if you know more about the comics. I don't care if they've completely changed something about a character. And the reason I don't care is because the comics themselves do that in all their different spurs anytime they want. It is literally in the DNA of DC, Marvel, comics in general to say we can have different takes on our characters. We can have different takes on our entire own internal universe in the comics. So why people then get as far as the movies and go, well, it's not okay because they told them to different. So it's a different Iron Man to who, to whom? Well, okay, that Thor is ridiculous because X. Well, which Thor are you really holding it up to? Well, my Thor, because this is the way I see it. It's like, and they've never met before. They've never met in the comics. Cool. Well, consider this like a new run of comics. It just happens to be showing up on screen and bringing lots of people, lots of money, and lots of legitimacy to the idea that superheroes are just another method of telling stories. Do not ruin it by holding on so tight that you're going to squeeze the goodness out of what's happening. That is my angry pitch, and it is very simply summed up by saying there are people who will watch a disaster movie about the end of the world and be fine with it. But then they will go, but I can't stand something where somebody has a superpower. So it's a storytelling device, just like the apocalypse in the other thing. That hasn't happened either, or, zombies or whatever it might be. I do not blame people for their choices. I get very angry at the people who are supposed to love this stuff and then gatekeep and try and push others out. And that's why I sometimes have difficulty with my car nerd brethren who want to keep people out of that. Oh, they don't know enough about, CVT gearboxes to really care about cars. It's like, shush. Somebody just said they like the color and they think pop-up headlights are cool. Don't try and talk down to them right now, because pop-up headlights are cool. That's going to be a good car person someday. Why is it that the MCU in particular has brought so much of that out of people, Paul? Explain it to me and calm my rather irate ass down.
So I can't. I think it's, so actually, no, I can. I think it's because so much of society, and I think D&D is similar to this. I think for so long, society has made fun of the people, of the fan base of these things, that now that it's become in vogue, that they are a little bit sore about the whole thing where they've, I don't know. Okay, so the epiphany thing is that I used to be one of the people that used to say that the books are better. Constantly said it, and it's not
Really?
just with MCU. Yep, did it with Lord of the Rings, did it with a lot of other stuff.
Before we met?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like MCU opened the doorway to realizing that, and it's specifically to do with movies and the source materials. I used to be like, yeah, the movie's really good, but the source material is better, and that's why I also think that it's a status thing, because I also was doing it because of a status thing within certain fan bases. The MCU has made it so clear that you can go and take the source materials and make such a really good open story with them that it's there's no point anymore to be just like the source material is better, because if people keep saying that, people won't make new things based on source materials that you really enjoy, and you won't get new stories. You won't get new versions of those stories. You won't get to see the characters that you've idolized or like really liked throughout your history, kind of thing, on the like the golden screen or the silver screen kind of thing. So like, I'm no longer a person that will automatically say, I will say it if I truly believe that the source material is better, kind of thing. But it is so rare. It's so rare nowadays that I can openly go, the source material is better, rather than going, they took the source material and really fucked with it in that movie, rather than like, just going back and just going, the source material is better. But Marvel made that happen because like the first Iron Man, I was just like, that is really really cool. They've really brought the character together. It's really cool. And then as they went along their own storylines and stuff like that, I was just like, this is really cool. And I'm a real big fan of the comic books and stuff like that. And yeah, it was very much just um, opening up to the
And
worlds and stuff like that.
being from, and I think you always manage to nail it just at the end of the shows, where I think you've absolutely called out maybe what I was missing. It's that people were felt marginalized, and it's not revenge. It's maybe a little bit of residual grump to it all. What I talked about, the car nerddom, that people want to watch which door you come in, and be like, well, you didn't come in the way I wanted you to come in. You didn't come in through hard graft, or watching this for years, or being into that, or being a purist, or standing out in the rain by a racetrack, or else you can't like racing because you've only ever seen it on TV. All that kind of stuff. Similarly with this, you make the point beautifully, but that's so weird in one way that we both can see it, and you're talking about a time when it was different for you. Do you think it's age dependent? Do you think it wasn't just that people did better? That things like Iron Man, you could see it was great. Do you think there was a part of it that was you just being around for longer and realizing that it wasn't important to feel that status or whatever it might have been?
So the status thing I think went away sooner than the Marvel universe, but the whole this is my thing, and I've been slagged and bullied over my thing, kind of thing. To see it grow and become more accessible to people, and including D&D and stuff like that. Like, I'm still a big fan of some of the older versions. Number 5 is really good for getting new people in. That's my nerd thing for D&D anyway. But yeah, I was bullied a lot for liking D&D and comic books when I was younger, and it made me kind of like, this is mine. And when people who used to bully me are now just like, yeah, Captain America is brilliant. Like you said, you didn't come in the door that I came in, which involved you punching me and stuff like that because you think I like Superman is weird and kind of
Yeah.
kind of thing. So like when it does become more accessible and stuff like that, there is a protectiveness over. I think this happens with certain source materials, and I do think that comic books specifically have this, and the kind of like, yeah, the fan base is protective over their thing, that there's a group of people that they could go to and talk about it and stuff like that. And now that it's become more accessible and stuff like that, there's a kind of like fake fan thing going on, which is just like, you never read all the comic books or came in the same door that I did
Yeah.
and didn't go through all the same things. But I'm now more kind of going, the amounts of people that now have gone back, they've watched the movies and the TV series and gone back, and now now we're reading the comic books and going into
Yeah.
the lore and comic books. Probably not as far back as some of the people that I know, but that's okay because I'm happy that now comic books and stuff like that. I hope this isn't a fad. I hope this is more about acceptance
Yeah.
than anything. I hope this is realizing that the thing that you find cool, that shouldn't in any way be a reason to lock the gate or be ridiculed over specifically.
Yeah. And
So
I'm being honest. I while you were talking about that, I was thinking about kind of something you said a moment ago about being bullied, and the idea that people will because I got looked down on for being into automobiles because you must be stupid, because like that's an interest. It's like that's for dumb people. And then all of a sudden, as I got older, it's like, that's for people who hate the planet and hate trees. Like, oh, okay. Neither of those things define me, I hope. And I was thinking, Brew, who's in our chat, I happen to know him and you know him. What maybe the rest of the internet doesn't know is Brew is one of the foremost experts on music. He should have his own YouTube channel about music. And I've talked to him about this gatekeeping in any way, and you didn't come in the door that I came in. Oh, pop music's bad. When you're 10 or whatever age you might be getting into music, it's like, whatever you like. Bruce, like, whatever someone likes, if they make a connection with it. Same thing for us. If you make a connection with cinema, if you make a connection with D&D, you make a connection with cars, racing, whatever it might be. It's about the power that we were all looking for. I think when we were a bit like, who's coming in and I have power because I know more. I've seen more races than you, or I've read more comics, or I know more about how music's made than you. That power, I think, completely gets dwarfed by the. I was in a room with a few people who all were holding on to this power, and now, thanks to the MCU, you and I, you way more read than me casual comic fan, we can walk up to just about anybody on the street and have a conversation of meaningful substance with about just about anybody we want about Marvel Comics, about the idea of superheroes, because they'll have seen one of the movies, or maybe they'll have seen 10 of the movies and maybe never read a comic in their life. But now, instead of the power of being in the room and knowing everything, everybody's flooding into the room through all these different doors. And there's a cacophony of conversation and new ideas and new thoughts, and people who've never read a comic in their life giving opinions based solely on what they've seen in movies. And I'm like, that's a really interesting idea. That's genius. That's fantastic. Fresh perspectives from fresh audiences who come from fresh angles will always add more than they take away. But that doesn't diminish somebody who's read every single released comic since the start of time. It doesn't mean that they haven't got more in one way. Yeah, they have. It just means that their life will also be better by the person who's only watched 3 Iron Man movies and has an idea about what they should do for a 4th one. It's all just us being able to talk about the stuff we love with even more people. I want the room to be full to max capacity, and then I just want a bigger room so more people can get in.
Yeah, it's definitely that. And I just glance over to Irish Bear's last comment there, which is the status thing has always been there
for comic book folks in particular. I think that is probably fair.
Yeah, and that I think that there's always going to be an element of deep fandom there, even when the room gets opened up to everybody else. I do think that there's going back to it, when the door was closed and it was just a few people in it, it became exactly like anything else. The people who knew more became more in tune with the community and stuff like that, more kind of seen as kind of higher up on the ladder of the scale. And in any society or any kind of fandom, I think there's always that kind of thing. But it's what happens when the doors get open, and you'll see the amount of those people, those status wielding people, get not bullied, but kind of I think either realize what they're doing, and they kind of, like myself, realize what they're doing and actually start going to people and going, you're going to like this one, I don't think you're going to like this comic, kind of thing. You become using that knowledge to kind of direct people into areas in which they're going to really enjoy, rather than still try to gatekeep a lot of stuff. But sadly, there also will still be those people who want to make themselves feel higher than everybody else because of their knowledge and stuff like that. But
yeah, and sorry, go for it.
All I gotta say to those people is realize that you've got a wealth of knowledge that could definitely direct people into areas of your fandom that they definitely will like more than just shotgunning everything. So
share your passion, don't smother it. Now, Paul, I was going to say we've got to move to a close. We've run horrendously over, as is our want and our way, because it's our show. Yeah. I hope you've all enjoyed it. The thing that I held back earlier on that I'm going to say is my closing statement is, this isn't really about adaptation at all. It's about including people. The world will always be better the more you can include everybody else, because someone else is just you with different thoughts and opinions. That's all it is. And when you get to have, we're talking about fandoms, and we throw around the word, or I've been throwing around the word fanboy as a derogatory. Fan is all good. The fanboy thing is specific to people who want to make that negative and keep it away from other people, or use it all negatively. There's never a situation where being more together will ever make things worse for people. Because you'll always get to give somebody else, like you said, somebody with knowledge, you'll get to give, and you'll also definitely get back, because you've got only one mind or only one brain in your head. It's so good, and that's why I don't do this channel on my own. I do it with Paul, because the thing that kind of completely G'd us up was that we bounce off each other and don't think the same way, and that makes everything better. So
Yeah.
include, don't exclude. So yeah, shut up, fanboy. Paul, will you walk us home and get us to the point where I hit the big red button?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, like, subscribe, ring that notification bell to get more of what we say. Which because we do a live video channel for these. These are more for the people who are not in chat. We do a live show every Thursday, 8 p.m. GMT. We will tweet out what the subject matter is. Get into the comments, comment down below what you think is what is a book that will never be able to be made into a movie. There's a good one, kind of thing.
That is a good one.
Because I think we could definitely argue ways of doing something,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And also, if you experience your fandom exploding and stuff like that, tell us the positive and negatives that you felt throughout it. Because I've definitely joined Formula One recently enough, and I started experiencing the more negative sides of the fan base, kind of thing, which is not in any way curtailed my fandom towards it. I've really enjoyed it, kind of thing. So yeah, definitely get into the comments, like and subscribe, ring us or even message us on our social medias about anything that you want to talk about. If you want to suggest something to us that you feel like we should talk about, do it. Don't forget, the chat on Thursdays is really kind of where you can share your ideas and stuff like that live with us and stuff. So try get to the live thing if you want us to live react to your stuff. So, but thanks for watching. It's been great. Which goes, sorry we didn't get to as much plays as I thought we might. But
Yeah, sorry. Actually, good point.
we have a short amount of time, so we can talk to you in socials.
Yeah, exactly. So who have you been?
I've been Paul.
Who have I been?
I don't know with your hair knot.
I was hoping that I just realized as I said it, he's either going to say Patrick or the guy with the dodgy Swedish serial killer hitman look from an 80s movie. I've been Patrick. He's been Paul. Who have we been?
We've been here to say it. Thanks very much.
And we will catch you next time. Take care, everybody.
Bye.